Seems a little darker tonight, doesn't it? Coming in. A little darker coming in tonight. But I do appreciate y'all being here. I don't know if you noticed, if you happen to look up, I know you probably can't read unless you have really good eyesight. You probably can from back there. But these are something that I found on YouTube, and it's just the prophecies that are in the Old Testament foretelling Christ and just how they have been fulfilled in Christ. And if you look at the, if you actually look at the video, you'll see that it's over 2 hours long. And this is just all the prophecies throughout the Old Testament that are fulfilled through Christ in the New Testament. It's just really just a neat thing. Kind of helps you see how amazing when you look at what Christ has fulfilled through that. I mean, we're going to look at a bunch of those tonight and go deep into some specific prophecies as well as some other things. But obviously we're going to be focused on the apologetics of Christ tonight. Let me mention a couple of things to you before we dive in. Don't forget that if you're interested in going to the movie on November the 19th, Against the Tide, you're sure welcome to pay me or to go ahead and go online and get those tickets. Particularly, you can get those through either Cinemark or Malco Tupelo, and you can pick those out. But I do have 25 tickets, which I think maybe 19 have been sold, so maybe have about 6 left. So if you're interested and you have not got yours and you'd like to go through me, you can. What I will do is just show up at the Cinemark, and I will be there and just scan you as you come in, and so we'll just get you there. I'll be there a little early, and so you try to get there early. But just let me know if you'd like to purchase one of those tickets from me, and we'll just kind of go from there. I wanted to show you, and Tracy, if you'll pull this up, you know, sometimes random videos will come up on about how people will use apologetics, and it comes really with a strong faith. But you need to know why you believe what you believe, because you're going to get challenged at particular times. This particular one I'm going to show you tonight is a Christian couple in Britain, I believe, who owned a bed and breakfast, and they just did not allow unmarried couples to take a room at their place. And in this particular video, a homosexual couple came and asked for a room. They turned them down and got themselves in a lot of hot water, so to speak. And it even made it to this daytime TV show that they interviewed them, and really were kind of putting them on the hot seat of why they chose to say no to these couples. And they couldn't understand these people interviewing them on this morning TV show. But the lady really gave an incredible answer to this. So Tracy, if you have that, just turn it up good, and I want everyone to hear it. I mean, wasn't that good? The lady wanted to say it's 2015 now. That was when that was, but it could be as easily as 2020. And you know, she said God has not changed. God has not changed a bit. And I think that's important for us, because she was so confident. I don't know how any of us would do under that kind of scrutiny on live TV to be cast as, how dare you? How dare you say those things and believe that? And she was very calm. And she said, this is what we believe. So all we have to do is stand on truth, right? All we have to do is stand on truth. We don't have to raise our voice. We don't have to scream and holler and get mad at people. We just hold to truth. That's all we have to do. And when we do that, God's word and His truth speaks loudly, right? And I thought that was a beautiful picture of that particular one. So, again, tonight we're going to really focus on the apologetics of Christ. And I really want to get into that in a moment. But this is what I want you to do. You may have this, if you don't have, I may have a few left. Last week I gave out these non-negotiables. I have a few left. If you don't have one, I'll be glad to give you one. These are just ones we've been focused on, the non-negotiables of the faith. And so I want you to continue to look over these, keep these before you. That way you can know these for certain. All right, coming your way. And you can hold these. Anybody else not get one? I got just a few left. All right, come over. These are ones I just want you to continue to go over and over. We're actually, Paul and I are going over these with the boys so that it's something that they are reminded of over and over and over. And I think this is very important because these are the areas that we can be attacked at. You know, this lady here was particularly attacked on the Word of God. And so she was able to stand firm on that. And it is a strong foundation. But we sometimes are real weak when it comes to that. The Word of God, and so certainly the deity and supremacy of Christ, Him being, being the image of the invisible God. Certainly the Trinity, original sin, and the separation from God. We are, the argument will always be, hey, we're good people, we're good. Well, that's not really the case. We all have sin and are separated from God and under His wrath until we come to Christ. The death, resurrection, and return of Christ, certainly the gospel, and salvation by grace through faith. So these are non-negotiables. There may be some others in your heart that you feel like I'm not going to go, but these are the ones we found as we looked at a lot of different things that we felt like this was the things that we just cannot go left or right on. All right, so this is what I want you to do for just a few minutes. We always kind of break up into small groups for a little bit. We're not going to take long here because there's a lot to cover tonight. But this is what I want you to do. I want you to argue a little bit, and when I say argue, it's always in quotes. And so we're going to argue a little bit tonight on on the faith. And so you have two different specific things that you can focus on. We have mentioned the three reasons for the existence of God that we've covered. Remember, the moral argument, the fine-tuning of the universe, and the resurrection of Christ. Those are the three that we have spent the majority of the time on, and we'll get into more as we go along the way, but those are the three that we focused on arguing the existence of God. If somebody comes up to you and says, I just don't believe God, those are the three that we have mostly focused on. So you can do those. So I want you to argue in there. Someone take the role, and I know it's not always easy, but someone take the role of, hey, I'm going to defend the faith through the moral argument, or I'm going to defend the faith through the resurrection. So give a few reasons why you are defending the faith through that if someone were to say, I don't believe that there's a God. Or you can go the other route. Someone in your group be the instigator in one of these non-negotiables and say, well, I don't really, believe in the Word of God. And so, and this is why I don't believe in the Word of God, because they're, whatever the case. But I want you to be able to defend your faith, and someone take the role of instigator, so to speak, the arguer, and someone be the one that's defending. So, let's see how that goes. So take a few minutes. Go ahead and get small groups of 3 to 5. We're just going to take about 5 minutes. That's all. But somebody do that. But be listening and find holes in arguments. Not that you're shooting them, but I want you to start thinking, okay, where am I lacking in my ability to do that? So, okay, let's pause for a moment. I just want to hear from you for a second. I want to hear what was the direction that your group took? What holes did you see that you all maybe were a little weak at? Or maybe what did you learn something new through that discussion? So anybody, any group want to report a little bit about yours?
I had a situation this week, and I was so disappointed in myself.
That's okay.
But I was with these 3 other ladies, and we were talking about politics, and so that's kind of the subject matter these days. And one of them said, "Well, I'm a Republican, but I'm more of a moderate Republican because I think you should be able to marry whoever you want to." And so then she proceeded to say that she knew what the Bible said and she believed that it was wrong and she wouldn't do it. But she thought that other people could do whatever they wanted to do. Okay, so the other 2 kind of threw in a comment or 2, and so I'm sitting there going, okay, apologetics class. I couldn't think of anything to say because she had already said she knew it was wrong.
Right.
She knew what the Bible said and she knew it was wrong. And so I proposed my question to my group about how would we respond to that.
No, I was just saying to point out the inconsistency in that. I mean, it's just, this is you either believe what the Bible says or you don't.
Mm-hmm.
It goes to a moral argument. Is what God says is right. If you go contrary to that, it's wrong.
Right.
One lady said something about, well, she was taught if you have the log in your own eye, don't point out, it was
Of
that
course.
tolerance argument or whatever. And I just, honestly, I couldn't come up with what to say, so y'all can help us.
No, that is a great point. And to add to that, when you, and it shouldn't be this way, but when you have relationships built, that even changes some as well. Because I would just say, last week, I ended up taking a homeless guy to a location. I had to drive him somewhere, and I got into conversation. It was a whole lot easier for me to correct his thinking. Now, I don't know if it really corrected him, but I could have that conversation. It makes it even tougher. But I think that's right when you're speaking particularly of the inconsistencies and how God's truth is right there, and we can either choose to follow it or not follow it. But there's no doubt about it that it is truth. So, coming to you, Matt.
What came to my mind, Jackie, that'd be a good time to quote 2 Timothy 3:16. The Bible says that it's all true, and you can either choose to accept it or not, but it says in the Bible that all Scripture is inspired by God.
Absolutely. All right, somebody else with your group, what did you focus on? What was the main movement of your group?
I asked this much. I told them I don't believe all that Bible stuff. I believe the science.
Did science.
I'm with the science. Why would anybody listen to this bunch of nomadic, desert, wandering, ancient people who knew nothing?
Right.
So I go with the science, and they said.
Who argued? Oh, yeah, Joy. Come on, Joy.
I just told Bill, I said, I know you're in the medical field. Look at the human body and exactly how it works. Do you not, when each heart beats, there's enough blood that goes out of that ventricle that goes to every part of your body that needs blood. And how can you say that just happened? That there has to be a God that created us so perfectly and intricately.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's a great, it particularly points back to something that he already knows, and I think that's good. I think that's really good.
She said that I surrendered.
You surrendered right away. All right. What else, y'all? The reason I'm doing this is not just to get you in uncomfortable situations. Well, maybe it is in some way, because this is friendly fire here. This is a good place for us to fine-tune our thoughts and to begin to get into mind what would we say if we were to come in contact with somebody who has an argument. And I want us to constantly be thinking, I want you to challenge yourself in this room when we come and we break up. I want you to start kind of throwing yourself out there, because this is the place where there's safety in a sense, because we're all on the same side, we're all focused on the gospel, but this will help us to know, okay, am I headed in the right direction? How can you help me? So don't be afraid to kind of put yourself out there a little bit and allow others to help gently, because I think we're all in the same boat. We're all in that position to where we're going to find ourselves, gosh, man, okay, what do I say here? Because this is the perfect time, and I want us to be ready. So we're going to continue to do this. All right, who else? Somebody else.
We didn't get around to talking about this, but one of the things that I began to do is to remember a verse that Jesus said, don't throw your pearls before swine. So he refused to talk to some people and argue with them and prove to them when they wouldn't listen to begin with. And he knew that. So he just went on to somebody else who would listen. And I think that's kind of a principle that we need to adopt too. So when I talk to people, if they're not interested, I just move on to somebody else.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because you're going to find those, and you'll know those as you get into the conversation with that really don't want to hear what you have to say, and they only really just want to argue, but you'll know those that are really seeking. All right, somebody else. Michael, come back there.
Well, we talked some about the deity of Christ.
Good.
And I threw out that, listen, every religion and myth supposedly had a person who was a god, and he listed out, everyone from, David Koresh to Hercules to everything in between. well, what makes it so significant of Christ, being a God? And then they threw back at me the fulfillment of the prophecies as they're being a sign, And then I said, well, all that was written after the fact, which is normally the biggest counter to the fulfillment of prophecy, was everything was written after the fact, And then they threw back at me that, there was martyrdom for the faith, that it couldn't have been written by a charlatan because no charlatan was going to give his life for something he didn't believe in. So, but anyway, I thought it was all in all a good discussion. But one thing that we did say is that if you're arguing with somebody and they don't want to believe, God always gives them a way out. God's never going to force somebody to believe something against his will.
Right.
But if he wants to believe, God gives him all the evidence necessary to convince him.
Yeah, very good, very good. That's a good discussion, Thank y'all for doing that, because that's good, just to continue to go back and forth. Because we're going to get into some more of these, especially when we're talking about the Bible, because it seems like it weaves in and out, because one will say, hey, I don't believe the Bible. Well, let's talk about the Bible. If you really want to talk about it, if you really want to discuss it, let's get into that. Some just want to get you off on a rabbit run somewhere, but it's important that we're ready. Do you have something particular?
We also did the moral argument, kind of
Yeah.
like what Jackie was talking about, and Stuart had just had this conversation with a cousin who had tried to kind of witness to someone, and he said, man, the guy's just like, you do your thing, I do my thing, and this was a younger cousin asking Stuart, what should I have kind of told this guy? And so we argued it back and forth about, it's relative to that person has to be a believer for that moral argument to make sense. So like in your case and in this case, the person, what did you say it was, a gay sleeping, something? Gay marriage. So they have to be believers for that rule to even be recognized, because unbelievers are doing what unbelievers do.
Sure.
And so it's the believers, those of us who are believers, our answer should be, and as we talked about, as a believer, I am responsible for following the word of Christ. For the unbeliever, they're doing what they believe is right. I do my thing, you do your thing. So really the argument, I guess, more than is it right for the gay marriage, for them, we know it's not. But the biggest thing for the Christian is, are you standing firm in your faith as an example?
Yes.
And saying why you believe it's not. And then like Michael said, that gives them the opening for the Holy Spirit to work in their heart, to go, wow, why did they think that's not right?
Mm-hmm.
And like Stuart made the point, when you're a believer, you want to go out. We're responsible for witnessing to others. And we have that urge in us for no one to die, for everyone to know Jesus Christ. Well, to a non-believer or a believer of, I'm okay, you're okay, if you'll notice, they don't really have that urge to go out and make sure that everyone is okay.
Sure.
It's a selfish belief of, I'm doing what I want to do, but I really don't have the urge. Nobody's going to hell because there's not a hell.
Right.
So I don't have to get out and fight for those people not to go to hell because there's no hell.
Yeah.
And so it was an interesting.
That's good. That's good. It's funny when someone says, don't judge me. I think everybody should be able to do what they want to do, and just in that kind of feeling. There's always one caveat. Y'all know what that is? As long as it doesn't hurt anybody. As long as it doesn't hurt anybody, it doesn't hurt somebody else. And so let me do what I want to do. And yet that leaves a lot of openings to go every which way but loose, and it's a very slippery slope with a lot of destruction there. So
if nothing matters, if it's okay for me to do what I want to do, why isn't it okay for me to hurt somebody else?
yeah, that's right.
The real question, is to turn that back
Yeah.
to what else can you apply this to? And if she's saying, I feel bad about telling somebody who's gay they love each other and they should get married, I know it's wrong
Yeah.
because I'm a Christian, but if that's what they want to do, that's okay. Well, you can give them a heroin shot and say, is that okay too? what other things are not okay? And as soon as they go, well, that's not okay, then the question is why?
That's a great point.
Where did
Great
that come
point.
from? Why it's not okay for you because you believe, but if you're gonna say something ultimately is not okay, what gives you that authority? And
That's a great point. You know, let's just say this is my line, and this is where this is where I'm not going to cross. Everything is good up to this point, and then all of a sudden, well, this is okay. Well, what else is okay? Well, let's go a little bit further. This is okay, and next thing we know, we're way away from that standard that God has put out there. Okay, this is the standard, and this is what I say is where I want you to be. But once you cross this and you begin into a disobedience, then it begins to just go and just wherever you want to go. So that's a great point, Will. Thank you for bringing that up. Somebody?
I think it's quite interesting because we just,
Again?
I think it's quite interesting because we just watched a video where they were trying to destroy those people's businesses.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, okay, if I can do whatever I want to, as long as I don't hurt anybody. Well, hey, I got to destroy these people's businesses because they're hurting my feelings.
That's
you know,
right.
is what you know. Is it? I don't think it's going to work. I don't think you can sin and not, and not be consequences, even though you think you're not hurting anyone. So.
Did you notice what the guy that was the interviewer, what did he say about who God was? Benevolent, loving, and what? Tolerant. And tolerant is that key word. Could you be tolerant? And that means very accepting of whatever.
I think tolerance is a farce.
He did too.
Ridiculous. Well, most of the world still more or less looks down on adultery. They consider me judgmental if I say the Bible says you shouldn't lay with a man as though with a woman, with another man as though with a woman. And they say that's judgmental, but they still kind of look down on adultery. Well, where are they getting that from? And also, what about the poor adulterer? Was he not born that way?
Yeah.
And not me, of course, but you. It may say you have to have, you lust after 20 or 30 women, you've got to have 20 or 30 women, or you just can't be yourself. You just can't be fulfilled. And so your little wife decides to put up with it for whatever reason, but then should we bring your adulterous wives into the church and celebrate your marriage to them? If not, why are we standing in judgment against you for that sin? And
So in a lot of ways, the idea of the slippery slope, it can just continue and continue and continue and go and go and go. And that's right. And that's the ridiculousness of that particular argument. But again, as we deal with people, as we love people and try to gently show them God's path, it's not always an easy traveling road. You know, that adventure is hard at times, but we can have a part of that, and that's the beautiful thing. Anybody else? Yeah, my adultery pride parade. All right, somebody else, anybody else have anything particular? I'd love to hear in your group. Jamie?
What I have seen here lately, mainly about the whole gay marriage and all this, one thing that stopped them in their tracks and their main defense is science. If it's right, how can you not procreate? It takes a man and a woman. And that's the main thing you ask them, and that gets them thinking.
Yeah.
Because, their main defense is science, but science proves a man and a woman don't belong together.
Right. And we'll do, and it doesn't have to be gay marriage, and it doesn't have to be adultery or whatever, but we'll somehow find a way to rationalize our behavior, won't we, no matter what it is. We'll find a way to somehow say, but I had to, or I need to, or that's what I am. So it can go into a lot of different realms there for sure.
And I think it would be, you can go on YouTube or whatever and watch In His Image, and it's all about this.
Yeah, in His image that really goes to the gender and those kind of things. Yeah, so AFA has that, so that's interesting. All right, anybody else? Okay, now, again, we're going to do this each week. We'll be back next week, and we'll do each week. We're going to do this, but I really want you to challenge yourself and put yourself out there, because you will have those opportunities to come. And I appreciate you even thinking that, Jackie. That's good that that was in your mind to think, okay, I've got to think of that. I think that's just a process. No, but that's all right. I'm glad that you had that in your mind and that began to think through those things, because that's the kind of stuff we don't know when it might happen, but in conversation, those moments come. And the more that we immerse ourselves in the non-negotiables, the more we immerse ourselves in the Word, then we begin to notice, okay, this is not right. We don't have to study the fake. We just study the truth. And when we know the truth, well, we recognize the fake a lot easier. Okay. Yes. So say it again. So she knew it was
I said
wrong.
I was so thrown off when she said she knew it was wrong.
Yeah.
Because that's my defense,
Yeah.
was the scripture that says it is wrong.
Yeah.
But she right away admitted that. And so then I was like, okay,
Yeah.
I don't really know where to go from here.
Yeah, it's not like she thought the Bible was wrong. She knew that
And
was
it was
wrong.
more like legislation that she was
Right.
concerned about.
Yeah. So yeah, that's interesting. So it's not somebody you had to convince whether right or wrong. They already knew that. So all right. So we're going to focus on the apologetics of Christ. We're going to do two particular things tonight in the time we have. Jeff, I want him to come on up, and he's going to speak very clearly on the apologetics of the resurrection. So Jeff, come on up and share particular about that. Take a lot of good notes. We're going to have some question and answer after this. You can have hand down if you want to.
I think this is on. I'll use this. All right, so tonight I want to talk about the resurrection, and of course we talked about this being one of the non-negotiables. This is one of the most central doctrine to the Christian faith for a number of reasons, and so we'll be looking at tonight 4 alternative explanations for the resurrection that critics offer to that. Then I want to give you 5 lines of corroborating evidence for the resurrection that even scholars who oppose the idea that Jesus rose from the dead will concede 5 different lines of evidence, and we'll give you that. And then we'll look briefly at the meaning of the resurrection in the Jewish culture and the significance of first century Christians that witnessed the resurrection. So first of all, when we go to the Gospels, we get the doctrine of the resurrection from the Gospels. The Gospels give us 3 things. They all give us Jesus' identity, which is a Christology. They give us the idea of who he is, because the Gospels are biography. So they're interested in who this person is. The second thing they give us is a record of Jesus' death. All of them give us a record of Jesus' death. Mark in particular, half of the Gospel of Mark is given to the Passion narrative and the resurrection. And then they give us Jesus' resurrection. So the Gospels are concerned with those 3 primary things. They all give us a lot of other things. They give us the parables, they give us the miracles, but they all, without exception, give us who Jesus is, how he died, and how he rose. And so I want to, the notes that I'll give you tonight in the outline actually came from a New Testament professor at Southern Seminary. His name is Mark Strauss, out of his book, 4 Portraits, 1 Jesus. At its core, the resurrection is the ultimate vindication of the message and the mission of Jesus. That's why it's a non-negotiable. It is the vindication of the message and mission of Jesus. Everything that Jesus said and everything that Jesus did hinges on the fact that he was raised from the dead. If he was not raised from the dead, none of it's true. If he was raised from the dead, all of it's true. So everything hinges on the resurrection. Okay? So that's the big picture. The resurrection is a demonstration of God's power, as we see in Romans chapter 1. Jesus Christ our Lord, who was born of the seed of David according to the flesh, and declared to be the Son of God with power according to the Spirit of holiness by the resurrection from the dead. It's the basis of the believer's faith. In 1 Corinthians 15:14 it says, "And if Christ is not risen, then our preaching is empty, and your faith is also empty." The resurrection was central in the preaching of the apostles. In Acts 4, he says, "And with great power the apostles gave witness to the resurrection of the Lord Jesus, and great grace was upon them all." And then in 2 Timothy 2, Paul says, remember that Jesus Christ of the seed of David was raised from the dead according to my gospel. So for the apostles, for Paul in particular, the resurrection indicates a turning point in all of human history. Everything pivots on that, from the age of promise before the resurrection to the age of fulfillment. Everything before was promised, and now in Christ it is fulfilled. So nothing in history has more at stake on it than the resurrection. Well, here are the four alternative explanations. So if you get a lot of scholars in the late 1800s and higher criticism and things like that, when they began to look at the New Testament with hypercritical eyes and in sort of a destructive way, they began to explain away the miracles. Okay, so the age of rational thought, there are no miracles, so how can we account for these stories? And so biblical scholars began to look at that, and they came up with four major ones. Three of them are all rejected, and the last one is the most common. Here are the rejected ones. It was called the swoon theory, and if you've heard of it, S-W-O-O-N, the swoon theory, that stated that Jesus simply fainted on the cross and only appeared to be dead. He was placed in the tomb alive, but unconscious, and in the cool air of the tomb he revived. He escaped from the tomb, appeared to his disciples, and later died of his injuries. Okay, so that's what they put forth as a possibility. Well, right away you see a lot of problems with that theory. It is highly rejected by scholars today. The Romans were experts at crucifixion and would have had to have been incompetent to let Jesus off of the cross alive. For him to remain alive in the tomb means that he would have had to survive flogging, crucifixion, massive blood loss, exposure, and then would have had to roll the stone away from the tomb from the inside uphill. And then to appear to the disciples as the victorious Christ. And as Mark Strauss says, that kind of Christ would have gotten pity, but would never have gotten worship. And so there are a lot of different problems with that theory. Remember, the disciples died for their belief in the resurrection. The second theory that was proposed is the wrong tomb theory. On Sunday morning, the women were simply mistaken on where Jesus' body was placed and came to an empty tomb somewhere nearby. They became excited and then proclaimed his resurrection. Well, the problems with that theory are, of course, the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea was a private tomb, and it wasn't like going into a cemetery with lots and lots of plots and you simply find the wrong one. This was a private tomb. The women took note of the location so that they could later come back and anoint the body. And then to be true, then all of the women would have had to make the same mistake. And Joseph of Arimathea could not find his own tomb. And the Pharisees missed a great opportunity to get the body and to prove everybody wrong. Okay? So that's the wrong tomb theory. The third one is the theft theory. The theft theory, and it is the oldest, of course. You know that's in the New Testament. It simply says that the disciples stole the body. It has problems historically and ethically. The disciples didn't expect a resurrection. They would have had to conspire to invent one. They would have also have had to agree to propagate a lie as the basis for the highest ethical system that the world has ever seen. So ethically, it's got problems with it, and even the worst critics agree that the disciples at least were convinced they had seen the resurrected Christ. They didn't conspire to invent the resurrection theory. The most accepted objection to the resurrection is this. It's called the legendary development theory. It simply states that the gospel accounts came about as legends of visionary experiences. So they would propose that the disciples had dreams, they had visions of seeing Jesus after he was crucified, and the early church simply interpreted these as signs that Jesus was victorious. And over time, these legends grew into detailed accounts that we now have in the Gospels. And that is the most difficult one to refute because it discounts all of the documents on its face. It simply says that they're not reliable at all, and it proposes a series of stories that came out of legends. One critic says that Jesus' body was probably discarded somewhere the disciples knew nothing about. So those are the main objections, at least in the scholarly world, against the resurrection. Let me give you 5 lines of historical evidence for the resurrection. Now, These don't use the scriptures. They simply are all things that people look at the historical documents and they'll come to conclude the same thing. Here are the 5 things. Number 1, fact, Jesus was crucified by the Romans in AD 30. No credible scholar would deny that Jesus was crucified under Pontius Pilate, and to believe that Jesus didn't die under that crucifixion is just inconceivable. The second line of evidence is this: Jesus was buried in the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea. There's no reason for the church to invent Joseph of Arimathea. Arimathea doesn't have any significance at all biblically. And it would be unlikely that a rich member of the Sanhedrin, who all voted to crucify Jesus, would then give this proposed criminal a place in his family's new tomb. The style of tomb and its availability also suggests that this was a wealthy person. The third line of evidence: the tomb was discovered empty on the 3rd day. They will concede that. The women were not considered credible witnesses, so there's no legitimate reason why the early church would choose to have women be the chief witnesses. It simply doesn't make sense. If the tomb were not empty, the disciples could not have preached the resurrection in Jerusalem, where their message could be proved a lie. They were in Jerusalem. The preaching began there. The people were still alive. If Jesus were in the grave, that would be easy to prove. The preaching was successful in Jerusalem because the tomb was empty. And there were no recorded objections that the tomb was not empty. No one ever came forward and says, no, we found the body. That never happened. Early converts came from Jerusalem and would have known better. So the story of theft itself presupposes the tomb was empty. For that story to even make ground, the tomb had to be empty for them to even say, well, somebody stole the body. And then worshiping on the first day of the week was also a direct result of what Christians believed about the resurrection. What else would account from a shift to Sabbath worship to worship on the first day of the week, on Sunday? The fourth line of evidence is that many credible witnesses saw Jesus alive. A fabricated account, as we've mentioned, would not have included women discovering the tomb empty. The account of Paul in 1 Corinthians 15 includes primary sources. These are people that are still alive at the time Paul is writing. His sources are Peter, the other disciples, James, and more than 500 people that saw Jesus alive at one time. And so in writing this, there's sort of a challenge that Paul is giving. Hey, disprove me. These people are still alive. If any of you have any other stories to tell, come forward. And that never happened. Hallucinations are personal and they're subjective. You don't have a room of 500 people hallucinating the same thing at the same time. That's really a powerful line of evidence, I think. Also, a spiritual or a visionary resurrection was contrary to Paul's belief as a Pharisee. The Pharisees believed in the bodily resurrection, and that's what Paul preached. And the final line of evidence is the transformed lives of the disciples. The effect of seeing Jesus alive and victorious over death had an enormous effect on the lives of those that followed him. Nothing else gives an account for the boldness and the zeal that they had in public proclamation after cowering in fear. You know, if you look back in John chapter 20, after the crucifixion, the disciples are together. John writes, the door was locked. They were in fear because of the Jews. The Jews had already put people out of the synagogue. If you confessed Christ, you were out of the synagogue. And so they crucified Christ. The disciples had gotten away and they were cowering in fear. And so what else would account for their boldness publicly in proclaiming the resurrection in spite of the dangers that were there? Here's a look at the meaning of the resurrection. In the Bible, the resurrection per se is not a highly developed doctrine in the Old Testament. You have indications of it in Job where he says, that in my flesh I will see God. Though my flesh decays, I will see him. You have Psalm 16 verse 10 that says you've not allowed your Holy One to see decay. You see David speaking in 2 Samuel at the death of his firstborn son from Bathsheba. He cannot come to me, but I will go to him. You have these vague little hints of the resurrection throughout the Old Testament, but it's not fully developed until it comes into the New Testament. And as we went through the Second Temple period, other perspectives began to come into being. The Sadducees in particular were a group of people that were really influenced by Hellenistic thinking. The Sadducees were the wealthy people who had cozied up to the Greeks, who were now trying to Hellenize Israel, and so they had position and power. The Greeks thought the resurrection of the body was a ridiculous idea. They saw a dichotomy between the spirit and the body. The body is evil, the spirit is the only thing that's good. So you have the Sadducees advancing a doctrine that there is no afterlife. On the contrary, the Pharisees believed that there was a resurrection, a literal bodily resurrection of the dead, and where God would reward the righteous and judge the wicked. And Jesus and Paul both taught from that perspective. And then the significance of the first century Jews. If you were in Israel and you experienced the resurrection, there are a number of things that would come to mind. When Jesus began preaching in the Gospels, and particularly in Matthew, but all of them, there is a big emphasis upon the kingdom of God. As a matter of fact, when Jesus comes into preaching at the beginning of Mark, his first words in Mark are, "The time is fulfilled, the kingdom of God is at hand, repent and believe the gospel." That's the message of Jesus. The message of John the Baptist is about the kingdom of God. So when you see a resurrected body, right away you're thinking that the kingdom of God, the rule and restoration of all things that were predicted and prophesied in Isaiah in particular, where God would restore everything, the resurrection of the dead would mean specifically the kingdom of God is here. And that's exactly what the Bible teaches. Jesus' death inaugurated the new covenant and the age of salvation. So his resurrection represents the fact that now you and I as believers enter into a whole new mode of existence and experience as human beings. And we look forward to our own resurrection from the dead. Another thing the resurrection of the dead symbolizes is Jesus' victory over the evil of the world. His victory and defeat over Satan and all of the evil of the world. All of the restoration foretold by Isaiah would be ushered in through the resurrection. When John the Baptist doubted that Jesus was the one, and Jesus said, "Go tell to John the Baptist," what did he say? "The lame walk, the blind see, the poor have the gospel preached to them, and the dead are raised." So the symbol of the Messiah coming to restore all things hinges on the resurrection of the dead. That's really, really big with the kingdom of God. It's not just a resurrection of physical life, but it is a beginning of the end times restoration of all things. Jesus himself being the first fruits. So the resurrection is central. There are good lines of evidence when you come in contact with people. You simply cannot account for all of the things that the gospel gives us outside of something happened that you just cannot account for, and that's the resurrection. Jim?
Now, as you've listened to that, let's say you got into an argument, and I mean, when I say that, please know when I say argument, I'm not talking about fist fight ready to break out. I'm talking about where you're beginning to really have good discussion, and you're going, okay, this person has a struggle with who Jesus is. What would, out of what Jeff just mentioned, what would be the first thing that would come to your mind that you might say? And again, there's no right or wrong here in particular, but just based on some of the things he gave you tonight, where would you go? What would be your immediate go-to if they said, "No, I don't know about this whole Jesus thing"? Where would you go? Judd, come to you.
Jim, I don't remember the old book that you have, but Jeff talked about it too. I think giving the evidence outside the Bible and from non-believers is very, very powerful. Mm-hmm. Because if they believe in the resurrection, it says something when it's different eyewitnesses that don't believe in the gospel or even, that faith in that.
That is such a key. I appreciate you bringing that up, because that is such a key. When you can go outside the biblical narrative and you begin to discuss, and we talked about last week, Tacitus and just Josephus and some of these others, Pliny the Younger. These are guys who were just historians, and I say just, they really did a lot of work, but they gave the resurrection this is what these guys believed. Whether they believed it or not, they might not have, but this is what they're writing it down. So I think that's a very good point. Where else would you go? What would be one of your go-tos if someone were to come and say, I'm really just not so sure about this Jesus, based on some of the things Jeff said tonight? Where would you go? Okay, coming to you.
Well, one thing that comes to my mind is the women going to the tomb and the excitement when they recognized Jesus. And at first they didn't, but he spoke. So he was a living being, resurrected being. And their excitement of going immediately to tell others.
I think that's a great point, because if we're ever writing some kind of story, or we're trying to put a little oomph behind what we're trying to get out there, we're going to always go to something. Okay, if I add this, and this is not, because I would do the same thing, but Todd mentioned a couple of quotes from C.S. Lewis. Took a little bit more this morning, right? That mean you made you go, oh, C.S. Lewis said this. You kind of leaned in a little bit. Now, if he would have said, well, some quotes from Jim Yates, you'd kind of go, oh, it's about time to go. But C.S. Lewis seemed to give it. So us, telling the gospel story, we're the writer, we're Matthew, Mark, Luke, or John, we're saying, okay, how can I add some oomph to this? Oh, I know, let me get the women to be the first. That would be awesome. Let's add that into our narrative, because that'll really give so people will go, oh yeah, I believe that's the least thing that you would write in there at that particular time in history, because their testimony was not reliable. So I think that's great. What else did you say?
I was just going to say, though, that people died for their faith, and you wouldn't do that if you didn't really believe it.
Absolutely.
And when he said something about the people who were, I forgot the words, but, weak and didn't want to speak out, turned into people who were bold and died for their faith.
Absolutely.
There's a couple other things that I thought about was Christ is unique among other religions in that, the leaders of all the other religions, from Buddha to Muhammad and all those, they never claimed to be God.
Yeah, right.
They weren't raised from the dead either.
That's right.
And then, the answer to everything is science. Well, science would fail you here.
Yes.
And, only the God who created it all would have the power to raise someone from the dead.
Yeah, that's good. And that's going to always be a go-to, particularly when you're talking about, hey, you've got Muhammad, you've got Buddha, you've got these other guys, these holy guys. Speak on what Jackie was saying, particularly about those guys who were hiding and then all of a sudden became these courageous guys.
Yeah, you'd have to come up with some way to explain that. I mean, the historical documents are clear in the Gospels that they were cowering. They ran in the garden when he was arrested. There was no doubt the Pharisees were throwing people out of the synagogue, and when you lost your membership in the synagogue, you pretty much lost everything socially. It's gone. Your business, everything. You lost everything by being a Jesus follower in the New Testament. So you either have to say, they just were mistaken. Maybe they thought they saw something, and then it falls apart when you have 500 people. So there's no comfortable place you can go to account for the change in behavior of these people, who then became very bold. Peter goes to the Temple Mount and pretty much charges them, you crucify the Lord of glory. They go into the Sanhedrin and they say the same thing to him, and they take note of them. They take note of their boldness because they've been with Jesus. Something happened in between the time of Friday night in the garden and then in the Temple Mount. I mean, you just have to explain it some way.
And you have to realize in particular that this wasn't 2-3 generations down the road. This wasn't 100, 200 years later. These were the very guys who had been with Jesus and now were hiding and now had come out to where they were willing to die.
There's another point in this, is it's one thing for people to die for something they think is true, the Kool-Aid drinkers in the jungle and that kind of stuff. But there's so many people, not just the 11 disciples that were martyred, but a lot of other believers early on that saw the resurrected Christ died. And there is no real explanation, scientific or wacky behavior, that says I'm willing to die a martyr's death for something I know is not true. And that's the other side to it, is how do you explain this? And it is documented by the non-church. This is the biblical side. This is recorded in history as well. It's like, why are these people dying for something that they don't even believe?
That's right.
I mean, that's another part, is if I know it's not true, but I think there's something in it for me, maybe I'll pretend to do that or something that way. But if I know it's fake, I'm not going to go through that kind of death.
It's like we said before, somebody's going to squeal. Somebody's going to say, you know what, it never really happened. I can tell you what happened, and let me tell you, give you the scoop here. All right, Matt.
Going along with what Jackie and Jeff said, they've been following Jesus for 3 years and he died. Well, human nature is such, when your leader dies, the organization just falls apart.
Right.
But it just the opposite happened.
Oh, that's a great point. Great point. Yes, it just absolutely exploded, which is really awesome to see.
You know, modern critics say that the Jews wrote the Old Testament after they came back from Babylon. Of course, that means they were there before Babylon. They don't answer that. They wrote it after they came back to Babylon to show that they were the chosen people of God, and that's why they should be preeminent above everybody else. However, if you were going to write a story like that, you would not fill it with examples of your God calling you a stiff-necked people, that he's going to punish and kick out of their land that he gave them and chase them through the nations with his sword, which he does endlessly. It's all over the Old Testament, God warning them about their sorriness. And even though he loves them, and they're still his people, they're going to get some bad punishment for that. In the same way, if you decide to write a new story where you can take over from these Jews with your new religion that you're founding, you're probably not going to put in there that the main honcho, the main disciple, denies Christ by calling down curses from heaven against him and then runs away weeping bitterly. You're probably not going to say that about your main disciple.
Yeah, that's a great point. All right, so putting you on the spot, because you're okay with being put on the spot, because you're good at talking. And I don't want you to give away anything, but knowing you're great with conversation with guys, and I'm sure you come in contact with a lot of guys who have a real hard time with just the Christian religion or Christian faith or even Jesus. Is there anything particular that you've picked up that at college or whatever that has stood out to you that this is kind of the struggle that people have, and how do you respond to those kind of particular things?
Definitely like trying to weigh your faith against what's legal. And I've had a lot of conversations with people where they say, well, I might not believe that. And that kind of goes with what Miss Jackie was saying. They say, well, maybe it's wrong, but it's legal, so then it's right. And so they have this misunderstanding of like separation of church and state and everything. They're like, well, we can't have that because that's wrong. And what I've tried to explain is like, yes, like you don't have, like that was kind of instilled to prevent men from overstepping God's rule, but the devil has taken it and like made it to where men cannot even mention God in something. And a lot of people have said there and like say, well, like homosexuality, they're like, well, it's legal, so it must be right. I just won't do it because I'm a Christian. It's like, well, are you a legalist or are you a Christian? Because either you believe that or you don't, or you have faith in every single law that's made. And something that I said to one person was, in California, they just legalized, like homosexuals can have underage intercourse. So a 30-year-old man can be with a 13-year-old boy, but it's okay because you're gay. So good for you. But you have to look at that and say, well, is it right because it's legal? Or am I going to stand by the fact that it's wrong because I'm a Christian and stand against that? And that's where a lot of people say, well, because it's legally this, like you should legally be able to be gay. well, if you instill that, then the devil's going to take just another step the next time, and now he's taking it to make it to where they can misuse children. And it'll just never stop. And that's what I'm trying to explain to people is like, well, maybe it's going to start innocent, well, nobody's getting hurt. If they want to be gay, they can be gay, but apply it to anything. Any moral rule can go, if you take God out of the legal aspect of it and say, well, I won't believe it because I'm a Christian, but if other people want to, then they can, then it's just going to go nuts. And so many people in college and my generation just believe like, well, because it's legal or whatever socially acceptable, then I can't talk against it. And it's like, absolutely not. Like, you need to instill, like, American values were founded on Christian values. Like, we are a Christian nation that has devolved from that. And most people like to say, well, no, we have freedom of religion. And it's like, all right, well, in Afghanistan or somewhere, my uncle's talked about, he served over there, men could kill their wives because they committed adultery, and it was legal, more religiously and legally. And the thing is like, if someone moves over here to America and still has that moral belief, but then his wife commits adultery and he kills her over here, he's not going to be judged under Sharia law in an American court and say, oh, well, you're Islam, so we're going to judge you by Islamic morals. No, we have American laws based on Christian morals that go, and we're going to judge you on those. Sure. So that's where, like, a lot of, like, I've talked with a lot of people, and they just don't, they're afraid to connect God to how they vote, how they argue and stuff, because so many people, lost people will come back and say, well, if it's legally right, then that's just your opinion because you're a Christian. And you can't force me to be Christian. And it's like, well, sure, I can't force you to, but you have to accept the fact that you will be judged by Christian standards, right, because it is a Christian nation that you're living in.
So, and that's good. You know, the conversations that are there and the conversations, and no, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I do want you to speak whenever you feel, because I know you have a lot of conversations as well. So feel free to share there, because I want to hear, I know the guys would love to hear from you. But there are a lot of things to where it comes back to that, okay, there's got to be a universal standard, there's got to be a standard, an absolute standard, and certainly we find that in God's Word. Does anything else stand out to you about what Jeff said in particular? What would you go to particular when you're talking about the resurrection?
There's one Jewish bookstore in Minneapolis, and I went over there one week. This was about 40 years ago. And I asked the guy who was buying himself there if they had a book about the swing theory. And he said, yeah, we got it somewhere. So I asked him, I swore I bought a copy, but I can't find it anywhere. So, but Jeff, I don't know if you ever thought about it, but one of the things that you forgot to mention about that really, I asked this guy about it, if he believed it. He said, of course. I said, well, who unwrapped him? And he looked at me like, what? I said, well, you know, the rituals that they went through in wrapping up a dead body, if he was dead, they wrapped it up. And I said, who unwrapped him? Yeah. He looked at me like, I don't know. And I said, well, think about it. You know, if he was there and he came to, he couldn't have unwrapped himself, could he? He said, I never thought about that. I said, well, think about it.
That's a good point. That's a great point. Somebody had to do that. All right, anybody else particular that goes along with just the resurrection? Where would you go to? What would be your starting point? Coming to you, Matt.
A lot of people we talk to will not be that familiar with the Bible. So I think it's important you tell them, say, look, you don't have to believe me. Go check with the Bible, go check with the writings of Josephus, and see if not what I'm not telling you is not true. And this is a side road. And if somebody asks you a question which doesn't have anything to do with what you're talking about, or very little, I think the correct, just say, I'll come back to that. Let's talk about what we're talking about now, and I'll come back to that later. Or I'm not sure, I'll have to check that out if it's unimportant.
Yeah, that's a good thought. We don't have to have every particular answer.
If you start the conversation and you talk to them and you say, okay, first of all, do you believe there was a man named Jesus on the earth? start right there. Because once they get to that and say, yes, I do. Okay, well now, who was he? Well, okay, he was a great teacher, he was a great philosopher, etc. Okay, was he crucified or not? Okay, now, okay, so that's the spot where you choose to quit believing what the Bible says and what other non-Christian historians believe. That's the spot. Why do you stop right there? You know, you understand all this other, but why do you stop right there? Because on that, you're going to get those first three for most everyone. They're going to go along with that part of it. And then you go from that point, okay, if he wasn't resurrected, it goes back to the point of why did these people lay down their lives for him? And if he was resurrected, it would explain why they laid down their lives for him. But I would always start when I was discussing with somebody about, do you first admit Jesus walked on the earth? And then go from that point, because I think you could get them to answer that question, then okay, why do you stop right there? Okay, why did you stop at that point of the story and decide not to believe that one part?
That's a great argument. All right, one more question on this, and I want you to think about it. We live in the sunny South, Bible Belt. Everybody goes to church. Everybody knows Jesus. So, how do you deal with people who know Jesus? They'll give you all the right words. They'll say, oh yeah, I believe he's the Son of God. I believe this. But their life does not match at all. They're living away from God. How do you deal with that particular way of thinking? What do you go to? What is your, and I'm going to ask you, Judd, where do you go when you come across people who, they believe all the things we believe, but when it comes down to it, they just don't want to follow. So how do you deal with that?
I think everything's through faith, and I think you got to be careful because you don't want to go down the road of works and you got to do this. But I had a friend in college. I went to a Baptist college, went to Samford University. So you know everybody was great there, no problems, right? But I had a really, really good friend of mine who grew up in the church. Of course, went to Samford, and he actually moved overseas. And he lives in London now and lives in homosexuality. And I talk to him a couple of times a year. And he's probably the most unhappiest person I've ever met, you know. And it's because he tells me, he says, I know I'm going to heaven because I'm a believer and all that. And I just said, you're not living the truth, you know. You're not doing this, and this is why you're so unhappy. And usually when he calls me, you know, we have great discussions, but when he calls me crying because he's so broken. And I always tell him, look, your brokenness is because you've gone away from the faith, you know. So I think when we see people that say, hey, I can do what I want to do, really it's going to catch up to you more than anything else.
That's so good. Please don't lose your compassion for people. Please don't lose your compassionate heart. Each one that you talk to that are either flaunting their disobedience or they're just struggling, they're all made in the image of God, and compassion for people and mercy towards people helps us in that relationship of talking with people. You know, when we get mad and we hate people and we're angry at people, you know, it can turn so many people away, continue to be, and that's what you were doing.
Yeah, so Chad is his name if you ever want to pray for him, but Chad came out to me over the phone in London. Let's see, Cole was already born, Mary Conley was already born, so probably 12 years ago. And like I said, I probably talked to him 2 to 3 times a year. And I'm always in the conversation saying, hey, I'm praying for you and I love you. You know, because that's what you got to do. I mean, I speak truth to him, and I don't tell him what he's living is right, but I still tell him I love him. And I think that's key, because I do know the unhappiness and the brokenness, one day he'll come back and say, I'm coming back to home, which is Christ. But you still got to love whatever you do.
And isn't that why he keeps calling you?
Yeah.
Because you know you do love him, and you.
The funny thing is,
I did change my number, and for a while, he texted Cole and he said, "Who is this guy?" But he gave my new number, so.
Good. All right, so continue to have that compassion for people. Anybody else in particular that has a story? Because we all deal here in the South, people who know, I mean, goodness, I'll pick up the homeless guy, and he knows all about Jesus, and he's probably been in a lot of different rehabilitation type things that are pouring Jesus into him, but he just can't break that.
Don't you think a good way maybe is to encourage that believer who has stepped out of their walk to get into some type of discipleship or something, and let God speak to them?
That's right.
Let that burden be on their heart of, what kind of witness am I? Am I really, that witness? Instead of going, do you know what you're doing is, trashing Christianity?
Sure.
Because again, use it, invite them into a situation where they're going to have to see themselves in the mirror as they learn to read the Word.
I think that's key. Obviously, we get them back in the Word. Matt?
Jim, you have asked the question of all questions, and I'm sure you can do a sermon series on why people who apparently have grown up in a church, they don't show any witness in their lives. Obviously, we would encourage them to get in the Word and to get in a Bible-believing church, but would you please answer that question for us?
Yeah, and I think we deal with so many different people who have that kind of that mindset because they believe they're going to heaven one day, but they can still live any way that they want to. And we've heard that argument forever. We've dealt with people in that way forever that have lived their life and they want to do it their own way, but they're still going to hold on to hope because I believe in Jesus. I believe in Jesus, and I think it comes down to, Teresa, a lot of what you said. It gets into get them back into the Word, let God's Word do the work, and until they're willing to do that, it can often just continue to lead them on this journey of where they just can't find their place. Jackie, come back.
I have a good friend who grew up, she became a Christian when she was at least by high school, maybe junior high, but she got really angry with God because someone died, and it's a long story, but and she went away from the faith for I think about 8 or 10 years, and she was a drug addict, meth addict, and all this kind of stuff, and she said that she completely avoided anyone who was a Christian because she knew they would shine light on her sin.
Wow.
And so she did not want to be anywhere near any Christians. And so at some point she turned around, I think it was a rather abrupt turnaround, and she came back, she's from Tupelo, she came back to Tupelo, and she woke up, this pastor and his wife, in the middle of the night when she came back. And so I said, what made you turn around? And she said, I knew that I was going to die if I didn't. She said that she, I lost my train of thought. That at first it was fun, that's what I would say, that she enjoyed the sinful lifestyle, but that Satan is a deceiver, and that after a while she was completely miserable, and she knew that her only relief was to come back.
That's so good. So good. All right, Bill, one more.
The old once saved, always saved gets us Baptists sometimes in a corner.
Yeah.
But there are numerous places in the New Testament where Paul and others warn about discipline of believers, both from the church and from God. Sickness, death are both mentioned as a potential discipline.
Sure.
And then this thing, he says, we'll all stand before the judgment seat of Christ. I don't think not to cast us into hell, but to give us rewards for the things done while in the body, whether good or bad. So in 1 Corinthians 3:12, now if anyone builds on the foundation with gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, or straw, each one's work will become manifest, for the day will disclose it, because it will be revealed by fire, and the fire will test what sort of work each one has done. If the work that anyone has built on the foundation survives, he will receive a reward. If anyone's work is burned up, he will suffer loss, though he himself will be saved, but only as through the fire. We don't really want that loss.
Yeah, that's a great point. Great point. Well, we're going to stop here. The next thing we're going to go into is prophecies, but I really want to hit that hard next week where we have a lot of time together. But I think it's opened up a lot of good conversation tonight because we come into contact with all kinds of folks. Some who know Jesus and they've been in the church world their whole life and they know all the answers, and yet they're still swimming and not really sure of the direction they're supposed to go. But we can always bring them back to the hope, and I think that's bringing them back to the Word. And I think I take you back to the lady at the front in that first video I showed you, which was so good. I just want you to remember the calmness that she had, the certainty that she said. She wasn't getting into a fight with these people, and they were ready. They were wanting to rile her up. They wanted to get her into something. And she stood firm on the Word of God. And we can too. That is our firm foundation. There's no doubt about it. Matthew 7:24, built upon the rock, and that's what we're built on. So hang tough with that. All right, so next week we'll get into the prophecies. Continue to look over the things that you have. Be ready to, and do battle next week, because I want us to continue to go back and begin to test one another a little bit. We'll get into the resurrection next week to allow that to be part of your conversation with someone as we get into that. If you have a conversation with somebody this week, share it, because I want to hear kind of what went to your mind and how you began to engage with people. And I think it's important that we do that. All right. Well, thank you again. Let me pray with you before we go. I appreciate you being here. Father, we just thank you so much for just this time we have. And Father, we acknowledge that certainly we don't have all the answers. We know that you do, and we know that we can stand firm on you. So, Lord, I pray that we would find ourselves fully embracing you each and every day. God, that we'll abide with you, and then we'll find ourselves growing in the faith. Father, we don't want to debate anybody. We don't want to get into fights with people. But, Father, we do want to be used by you to help point the way to you. May we be a signpost, but, Father, may we point them to the hope, and that's Christ. Thank you for just this time together. Thank you for each one that's in this room and their heart for you. I pray that you would use us this week to be a light for you, for West in your name. Amen. Thank y'all. Y'all have a good